Welcome back to Beyond the Ledger, where we break down the numbers, the narratives, and the nuances shaping today's financial and advisory landscape. I'm your host, Shardae Layfield, and today we're exploring a topic that sits at the intersection of strategy, investigation, and informed decision-making. How valuation and forensic accounting work together to reveal the full story behind complex business matters. In today's episode of Beyond the Ledger, we're taking a closer look at how collaboration across advisory disciplines can make all the difference for clients facing complex business challenges. Joining us are DeKreek and Davis Reynolds of Bennett Thrasher's Valuation and Forensics Accounting Practices, two teams that recently partnered on an engagement where precision, insight, and coordination were key to delivering results. Now let's get to know our guests a little bit more. So DeKreek is a director in Bennett Thrasher's Disputes, Valuation, and Forensics practice, specializing in valuations that support estate and gift tax planning, compliance, and strategic transactions. She has deep expertise in partnership discount studies, strategic planning valuations, and gift and estate reporting. And Sarah's work spans a wide range of industries with a strong focus on manufacturing and distribution. And Davis Reynolds is a manager with the Disputes Resolution and Forensics practice at Bennett Thrasher, specializing in litigation support, investigations, and insurance claims services across a wide variety of industries as well. Davis has a passion for understanding client problems, then analyzing and interpreting their data to help them craft a tailor-made solution. Thank you both for being here today. I'm really excited.
Thanks, Shardae.
Thank you.
Yeah, we are happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to dive in a little bit more. So before we dive into the details, I'd love to set the stage for our listeners. So can you give me the 50,000-foot snapshot of the recent opportunity that the valuation and forensics teams had to collaborate on an engagement with your client?
Sure. So I'll dive in first. As you said, we recently had the opportunity to collaborate with our forensic team on an engagement for a client that was looking to sell his interest in several companies to his business partner. And just to give you a little bit more background, valuation and forensics, we typically work independently. So forensics has their clients and their engagements, and we have ours. But this was a unique opportunity where the client really didn't believe in the reliability and basically wasn't trusting of the financial data. He didn't actually work in the companies. And so it was a great opportunity for us to partner up with forensics to get them to come in and take a look at the data, really help us understand where are the holes in the data, is it reliable, where maybe we would need to rely on industry data a little bit more for the valuation. So once they were able to go in and really dig into that information, then we were able to have more reliable information from a valuation standpoint to go ahead and value each of those companies based on supportable information and to provide a great basis for the client to then go and negotiate the prices of those businesses.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I think from the forensic perspective as well, and in addition to everything that Sarah already said, there were some questions surrounding potential additional financial impropriety and maybe misuse of company funds and things like that. And so we were able to go in and help answer those questions as in addition to everything related to the valuation.
Thank you for that insight. Okay, so let's rewind to the very beginning of the engagement. So how did the engagement start? Was it the forensics team that was pulled in first, and that's what led the valuation team being introduced, or vice versa?
So in this particular engagement, it was the valuation team that was called in first. We have an attorney that we have in a relationship with that called us in. He had a client that unfortunately there was a death in the family, and the remaining family members took over or basically inherited the interest in these different businesses. So he called us, we went down and we had an in-person meeting with the attorney and the clients. And in several businesses, there are various restaurants, gas stations, convenience stores located throughout the Southeast. in that first initial discussion where we were talking about valuation, which we do quite often for estate tax purposes, and that's what we went in to discuss with them. We uncovered some more information as we were going through talking about each of the various entities, and the client said, alluded to the fact that although he wasn't directly involved in the business, he had heard from some of the managers of some of the businesses that maybe there were some things going on. As Davis had alluded to in the previous question, maybe there was some misuse of funds. And it basically came down to the fact that he was not confident in the financial information for each of these entities. So that is the basis for what we do for valuation. We are heavily reliant on the financial data that the client provides to us. And so it was a great opportunity for us to say, okay, we don't want to do a valuation based on information that you don't believe is reliable. That's not going to result in a good and reasonable and supportable valuation. So we have a forensic team. They can come in and take a better look at the information, and I'll let Davis speak to exactly what their process is. But that really led to us saying, if it's a possibility and you want to go down this route, we have a team that can provide those services and then get us to a position where we can then go in and do the valuation work. So that initial meeting then led to a second meeting where we brought in the forensic team, and they talked then about how they could help, and then we went from there.
Mm-hmm. That's great to introduce that opportunity to your client, for sure. It's kind of a well-rounded experience, for sure. Okay, so once the initial scope became clear, the forensics component quickly became important. So once the client realized there was a need for the forensics component, can you describe what that work consisted of and the end product of the client?
Absolutely.
To the client, excuse me.
Absolutely. Once we got involved and we understood that there was a issue with the reliability of the financials, our job is then to get them reliable. In this case, the reliability issues were pretty widespread. It was not a matter of cleaning up an account here or there. It was pretty across the board, the entire financial statement. So in that scenario, we believed it best to go straight to their third-party documentation, things like bank statements, revenue statements, point of sale system statements, credit card statements. So the first thing we did was have a conversation with the client and request all of that data. Once we got that data, our goal then was to go through those statements that the company would not have had control over, because if they didn't have control over it, they can't influence the liability. And so our job was to then go through, and for example, I'll say the bank statements. Our job was to go through the bank statements. Within the bank statements, we'll have the money coming in and we'll have the money going out. We'll have pretty much everything we need to create a income statement for them. And so our job was to go through and create a pseudo income statement based on these bank statements that we felt was a more reliable product than the financial statements they were currently working with. At that point, because we have not been in constant discussion with the client while we were doing this, we then reach our kind of stopping point of like, okay, we feel good with what we have here. Now let's set up a meeting with the client. We would have meetings with the client where we would walk through the product of showing them what the new income statement looked like, because while we felt pretty good about what we had put forth, there were still plenty of areas where we had to make a judgment call. And it's not our business. It's their business. They know their business better than we do. So the best thing we can do at that point is rely on our client to help us make those judgment calls and tell us where they disagree, where they think we got it right, et cetera. And so that was the main process of what our job was to go through, to stick in our wheelhouse, go through third-party documentation. That's what we do every day. Go through that documentation, recreate a picture of the activity of this company that we felt and they felt was accurate. And then from there, any judgment calls and anything like that, we would then discuss with them and reach a consensus decision of how to treat those specific items. Additionally, as I alluded to earlier with questions of financial impropriety, maybe misuse of funds, we were able to, while we were recreating financial statements from the bank statements, we're going through the bank statements, we're going through their financial activity. We can knock out two birds with one stone right there and go through and check for any instances of financial impropriety or misuse of funds. And what that looked like was largely us compiling a list of everyone that got paid and going back to the client and saying, hey, this appears to be a legitimate business expense, depending on what type of business it was. Can you confirm that? Or on the flip side, this does not appear to be a legitimate use. We don't know what this company is. We don't know what this charge is for. Do you have insight? And so that is what the back and forth looked like for our portion. The end goal was, fortunately, we did not see rampant misuse of funds. So we were able to kind of sunset that side of the project and then move to really refining and finalizing the financial statements for the valuation team.
So now shifting into how the two disciplines work together in real time, at what point did the valuation work start? And was there overlap between the forensics and valuation processes, or did one depend on the other?
I can start if you'd like. I would say the valuation started, obviously they were involved from the beginning, in terms of they brought the client in, they brought the project in. So they were involved from the very beginning. I would say in earnest, the valuation started once we had gotten to a point of, with several companies, we were able to kind of take it one company at a time and start with a company and have them a work product to work with. And so once we had finished company one, they were able to then take company one and begin. And in regards to overlap, there definitely was overlap with a job like this, considering we are beginning, we got in the weeds, I'll say first, in terms of the data. We had time and had discussions with the client about judgment calls or the way to treat certain expenses or certain income. And so we were then able to constantly have a back and forth. I mean, I know we had several meetings where we would just all get in a room and say, all right, let's work through all the questions we have. And we could provide answers as best we could. And sometimes that was answers of things we had done or things we had seen. And other times that was answers that we had previously gotten from the client, so that they were not having to go back and ask duplicate questions to the client when it was something they had already answered to us as a whole.
Yeah, I would just add that I think initially it was much more a forensic project, because we knew going into it that we couldn't use, from a valuation perspective, we could not use the information that they had available. And valuation is very much a garbage in, garbage out. You give us bad information, you're going to get unreliable, unsupportable value. And so while it started off with being very heavily forensic analysis, once it shifted over to, we started working with, as Davis alluded to, like company one, company two, once we started working with that data that they were able to put together, I think it really quickly became much more collaborative between the two groups, because we did rely on their information so much that we were able to go back and forth with them and ask a lot of questions, as Davis said, either can you clarify this for me, or, I know you've talked to the client about this before, can we just run through this again, make sure we're understanding it correctly, what are your thoughts on, this piece of the data. So and then once we had a good understanding, and then we pulled it much more into the valuation process and put it through our models and came up with our analysis, but still touch points with the forensic team pretty much the whole time. Because there were so many companies, we were pretty much always touching, both groups were pretty much touching one company or the other throughout the whole process. I would say really up into the end.
So from there, the valuation work had its own set of considerations. From a valuation perspective, was the information that the forensics team provided material to the valuation work?
Absolutely, and we really, we talked about this a little bit because the initial data that they had that they did not believe in the first place, the client, because it was questionable. We really relied so heavily on the financial statements, the income statements that the forensic team put together based on their very in-depth analysis of all the information that Davis talked about. So they recreated for us, really, for many of these entities, they recreated historic income statements for us to rely on. So then we can go back and say, okay, with support and confidence, here's what we understand the financial condition of the company to be at this point in time at our valuation date. And here's what, because valuation is really a forward-looking exercise, what are the future earnings of the company? But to do that, we need to understand where they've come from, where they are right now, and why. And so they were able to basically put together those income statements for many of the entities, and then come back in and explain the why to us. Like, here's what happened. Because I think for some of these companies, there were some intermingled accounts because they were somewhat related. And so that can be really challenging from a valuation perspective. We don't do the same process that the forensic company does, going back and really digging through those individual accounts to understand it. We are much more relying on the client to provide us good data. And while we will ask why, why did sales go up? Why did costs go up or go down or whatever? And you can tell us the story. We're not questioning the data. And so for forensic to be able to provide us with reliable data was really key to our valuation process. So we absolutely relied very heavily on their information, even if the result of one of the companies was to say, we went through this and we think it's pretty reliable, so you can rely on the financials for this company, because that happened as well.
That was great insight. Thank you. So one of the themes of this episode is the value of multidisciplinary approach. So what was the benefit to the client of hiring BT to complete both the forensic work and the valuation work? And that's for both of you guys, if you want to take on.
I think there was a great benefit for our client. I think having both of us in-house, we sit next to each other in our office, where I can look up and right now I see 3 valuation people. There's a return on that, in that we have a relationship. If they had gone outside and they had found another forensic group and another valuation group that were not connected, there would be a lot more duplicate work required by the client. If we go in and we ask questions, as I alluded to earlier, we have questions about certain transactions. We have questions about the way certain things are treated or the relationships between companies. Once we get that answer, we can then facilitate and go ahead and have that answer ready for the valuation team, so they don't have to ask it. And that's a big savings on time and cost as well for the client, and peace of mind. They know that we are in constant communication, and that while they may not have the answers to everything, because a lot of our clients are not necessarily financial experts. That's why they hired us. And they know that they have 2 financial experts that are communicating in our terms, and they don't have to be relied upon to play a very complex, boring game of telephone. And bounce that back and forth. And they don't have to take what they heard from the forensic company and truly digest and understand that in a way that they can then communicate it to the valuation company. They know that we are doing that for them. And then we are then turning around and communicating our findings and the results in a way that makes sense to them, and that they can digest it and understand it without having to be overly involved in the process of understanding everything in the way we say it. That they can then, sit back, let us do our work, and then we can communicate it. And it's a much more client friendly, and we're asking less of a heavy lift of the client when we do that. And I believe it results in a much higher quality end product for them.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Davis said. And I think, if you just think about from a client service perspective, if you have to, we work with a lot of attorneys. They're often are in with the client. So our relationship was with the attorney, and then we've got the client who is usually the business owner. So that's us as the service provider, the attorney, and then the client. So that's three parties right there. If we had to go outside, either for another valuation team or forensic team, and coordinate calls with all of those parties for every question that we had, and again, this was very collaborative in that we were going back and forth a lot for this, to understand the information, to get more information. Just the time, I think, that we are able to save, not having to go through the process of coordinating a call to answer every single question, because it's not like, okay, we get it to this certain point and then it's ready to go. There was a lot of back and forth in this process, and I think that's probably typical of a forensic process. Maybe sometimes one question leads to another, then you have to circle back. So I just really think of one of the huge benefits is the fact that we don't have to do calendar figuring out for everybody, because that can be anybody that has to do that for anybody. That's awful. You're like, let me throw out 10 times that might work for me, and then they respond back, well, I have none of those days that work for me. And so just again, being able to go around the corner was a huge benefit to the client. And again, the confidence in the information, I really think for this client, it was really important, because ultimately they're going to sell these businesses. So this is resulting in real dollars to them. And they really want to be sure that what they're selling these businesses for is reasonable. There's a reasonable basis. Now, price negotiation may lead to something different, but they walked away from this knowing I have the best answer of what is a reasonable basis for value. And I'm confident in that. So they don't have to look back 6 months from now and think, well, maybe they weren't reporting that correctly, and I didn't consider that. So huge benefits to the client, I think, in us working together.
And building on that idea of value, let's talk practical impact. So do you think engaging BT for both forensics and valuation services resulted in cost savings to the client?
Absolutely. Going off of what Sarah just said, it takes time to get meetings on the calendar with outside parties. It just does. And you can sit there and go back and forth, and you have a back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and then you end up having a meeting 3 weeks later. Well, and then it takes time to do all of that back and forth. And it allowed us to be more efficient than it would have been if we were working with an outside valuation group, or if valuation had been working with an outside forensic group. And so those efficiencies that we gain from being in-house results in a time and money savings to our client. As Sarah alluded to earlier, forensic accounting a lot of times is not linear. One question leads to another, which leads to another, which then you get an answer that takes you back to the first question, and you're like, hold on, this is all, we need to think about this again. And with that being the case, as valuation would ask questions, or we would ask questions, that whole process where if we had gone back to the beginning and we were having to coordinate with another outside valuation group, we would then have to say, take the time to meet, fully explain, get into more detail of like, hey, you have to undo all of this work. And then they would have to do, because they're not outside, there would need to be some level of, they would feel a need to verify what we were saying to an extent. They would have to do their own verification. That would take time. Versus with us being in-house and working through the data at the same time, when we say, hey, we need to go back to this, we can do it in real time. We don't have to wait. They don't have to verify. We have the relationship, and it just makes it a much more efficient and efficiency results in a cost savings to our client.
And I would just add to that at BT, we have a robust valuation group. We have a robust forensic team. And so if it wasn't just dependent on me, it wasn't just dependent on Davis. If one of us was not available, we had other team members working on the project that were familiar, that can keep it moving forward. So I think that's definitely a benefit, the size of each of our groups. And I would just echo everything that he said. I do think that there's absolutely so much value in having us both here and relying on the information that I know their team has already gone through, and let's say it's an operating agreement or something like that they have reviewed. I know this team, and I can rely on the fact that they said, okay, here's the content. If it's an outside group, and I'm sure the same is with Davis and his group. If it's an outside group, I feel an onus to say, like, okay, I can't just take your word for it. I still need to vet it. I need to review it and come up with my own conclusions just to confirm. That's just good due diligence. But when you're working with your own in-house team, there's a level of trust there that you wouldn't have working with an outside party.
And I think one other thing to add that just popped in my head, another benefit we had is, as we had discussions with this client, there were discussions that were more forensic focused, and there were discussions that were more valuation focused. Mm-hmm. But because we were all in-house, it was very easy to walk around to Sarah's office and say, hey, we have a call Monday at 11. Do you or does someone on the valuation team want to be on this call to hear what is discussed? And then when they had calls, they would walk over to my office or to one of my colleagues' office and say, hey, we have this call Tuesday at 12. Do y'all want to be on and hear what is said? Because the discussions in both of those meetings could impact either what forensic did or valuation did, even though that wasn't the focus of the meeting. And so then instead of having to schedule a separate call to then discuss what was discussed or whatnot, we were already there. And that allowed us the client wasn't having to relay that information twice. If they relayed it once, it got to all parties. And that was a big savings and made us more efficient as well.
And both of you all, with partnering, you not only provided cost savings for your client, you were able to be reliable and convenient, and it sounds like just a perfect match, honestly around the board. So thank you for providing that, because it definitely, like, if you can make the process easy and people can trust what you're saying and you have a very thorough process, I mean, that puts your client at ease through this lengthy process, or I can imagine it could be very lengthy. So thank you for sharing that, for sure.
Add one more thing. I think that obviously to the end client who's paying the bills, it is a savings because of all the things that we discussed. But there's also kind of the middle client, which is the attorney who is advising that client. And with us collaborating and sharing information, being the one place where they have to make sure they're sharing information to not two separate parties, I think it makes their job a lot easier as the other professional advisor to that client. It gives them a lot more confidence in the information that we're coming up with, because we are collaborating.
And I'll go off of that. It also makes the data with issues like this of needing to be secure and confidential, the attorney only having to deal with one party and send information one place minimizes the risk of that confidentiality becoming an issue. It really makes it a much simpler one-to-one process instead of 1 to 5, 1 to 2, whatever. It makes it a much easier engagement for the attorney as well.
So on a personal note, collaboration often creates memorable moments. So what was your favorite part of working with each other on this engagement?
I know for me, I have friends in the valuation group, and you walk in on Monday morning and you discuss what you did on the weekend, or you discuss the football game, or whatever. But everybody knows there's a difference in seeing your friend in friend mode and then seeing your friend in work mode. And it's very fun to get to see your friends in work mode. It's a experience you don't get all the time. I know for me, that was very fun. There's someone, Cameron Angle in the valuation department, me and him talk a lot all the time at work. And so being able to then take that and have those discussions where we're getting to accomplish a goal together makes a project much more enjoyable. So that was probably my favorite part. It's just always fun to get to work with your friends.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite part of working together was very similar to what Davis said, although I feel like I see people in the professional setting all the time. So for me to see people on a more personal basis and to have all of the conversations that come along with, okay, we've had the conversation, we've had the call with the client, but then we start talking a little bit, to see the more personal side, I think was really the fun thing about this. And you know, BT is such a big firm and we have so many service offerings, and you know, we have a lot of internal talks talking about what the other service lines do, but it does not compare to actually working with somebody and seeing what they do, and really gaining a deeper understanding of their capabilities for their team. And so I thought that was really fun. It was really fun to have two advisory roles collaborating for a real outcome for the client. And I just think that really speaks a lot to what BT brings to our clients. You know, if I don't know the answer, I've got a teammate that does, and I can pull in 5 other professionals that probably can find the answer if I don't have it. So that really, I think the fun part for me is just really understanding more about what this group does and how we can be so effective helping clients.
I see more partnerships in the future. So thinking about the broader relationship between your two teams, was this project a typical reflection of how your teams have cooperated in the past?
Yes and no. There's a lot of ways our groups can collaborate. In the setting of there's a valuation engagement and there's a question of data reliability, and so a forensic team is needed. Yes, this is like the prototype of how we work together. However, there's been several instances from the forensic side where it might have been a forensic project first, where I can think of there was one project where there was a question of two business owners had a question of who was owed what. That we were brought in for, we were answering that question. However, as the debate continued, they decided it may not be in their best interest to continue the venture, at which point valuation, they needed to know the value of the company in order for them to buy each other out. At that point, we brought valuation in. There's also been plenty of other times where, in what I specialize in the litigation and investigation setting, where I may have a lawsuit that I'm involved in, that there may be a valuation element that it's not, I can address it, but I'm not, the best resource. I'm not a valuation team. And so I'll go to someone on the valuation team. I just mentioned them, but Cameron is usually my resource. I'll message Cameron and be like, hey, I need to talk this out. Or, hey, do you have data, or do you have a resource for this question I need to answer? I actually did that last week with an engagement I have going, where I messaged him and said, hey, I need your input on this area that I'm working on, and had him help me out with some industry data and his opinion on how that would best be used. So that's something we do all the time. So there's a lot of different ways for us to collaborate. And a lot of times it's not necessarily a full-scale engagement like this is.
Okay.
That was how it was here, and that was great. And, something we don't always do, but we get plenty of opportunities, but there's constant back and forth between our groups, especially with us sitting next to each other and being, right there. We can have their front of mind if we have a question that we think, hey, I think this falls more in their area of expertise. Let me just run over there right quick and just ask the question. There's a lot of that goes back and forth, and it really makes, I think, both sides stronger.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that this project that we're talking about, it came into valuation first and then led to a forensic and then, the very collaborative process. I'm working with the forensic team right now where a project came into forensic first. They discussed what was going on, pulled us in, pulled the valuation team in. So we'll be doing a piece of that. So it's another, like Davis said, there's a lot of like one-off opportunities where we just are doing knowledge sharing, which is so great. But there are other opportunities where we can actually collaborate on projects. And I just feel like once you do one or two, you really understand the extent to which you can collaborate. And so, that's a hope that as people listen to this and really understand that as an advisory practice, the shared services it's such a strong model. Like we really can leverage each other so well. Again, even if it's just for knowledge sharing, which we do so often, but again, for collaboration, it's really provides such a great value to the client.
And I think to bounce off of that, one of the things that all of the advisory services have in common, and I think the whole firm as a whole has in common, but specifically, even more so in the advisory services, our goal is to solve the problem.
Yeah.
We don't have the ego of our goal is to solve the problem, our group, or us to solve the problem our way. Our goal is to solve the problem that is in a way that is most beneficial for our client. And if that is for us to take a step back and say, hey, I think this is more of a valuation project than it is ours, we will do that. And if we believe it's the best for us to collaborate, or if it's best for us to own it, that is going to happen. But at the end of the day, all we care about is solving the problem and delivering a successful result to our client. That's what the goal is. And if it is us, them, all of us, it doesn't matter. And I think that attitude leads to a lot of collaboration, but also it leads to the client doesn't have to worry about us having our own interest. Our interest or their interest, and that's the goal.
Right.
And I think it just makes a much smoother process and better results at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I would just add one more thing to that is that
yes,
I think for the ultimate client, for sure, for our referral sources, which oftentimes are attorney or other professional advisors, sometimes they will come. I had an actual business owner call me and say, here's what I'm considering. I'm thinking about buying a business. It's international. They've got some brick and mortar stores but we would want to take them online. There's some C to S conversion issues. I don't know what to do, basically. Like, I know if I'm going to buy this client, I know valuation is one piece of it. So my suggestion after a couple calls to some of my colleagues throughout the firm was, let's get together in kind of a whiteboard session. I will pull in someone from tax. I'll pull in someone from transfer pricing because there's international issues. I'll pull in somebody from, just the various different groups, the due diligence group if there's going to be a deal. And we can all sit at a table for an hour and talk, because that client doesn't know the questions to ask. They don't know what they don't know.
Right.
I don't know everything, and a lot of that was out of my wheelhouse. And so that's a great solution where BT can come in and just play off of each other and kind of figure out what's the most reasonable, best path forward for the client. And that is such a gift to some of the other professional advisors, like the attorneys, that they don't want to have to go to 5 different financial service providers. We can provide that in-house in one firm, and we can figure it out for them. That's so great. So, and it's so much fun for us to do too. Like Davis said, hey, if I can pull in a client and then give the work to 5 other groups, that's wonderful.
Right. Right. Well, thank you both so much. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Davis, for being on and giving us so much in-depth insight into your partnership and what that looks like and the continued partnership that I'm sure you both will have. But we appreciate it and thank you for being on today.
All right. Thanks, Shardae.
Yeah. Thanks for
Thank
having us. We
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
That wraps up today's episode of Beyond the Ledger. A huge thank you to Sarah DeKreek and Davis Reynolds for giving us a behind-the-scenes look at how Bennett Thrasher's valuation and forensic teams help work together to bring clarity, confidence, and measurable value to clients facing complex situations. If you found this conversation helpful, be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And to learn more about BT's forensic accounting, valuation, and broader advisory capabilities, visit btcpa.net. We'll be back with more conversations and stories and insights from the experts shaping the way organizations solve problems, uncover opportunities, and move forward.